The nurse took the money, and the lie was set in motion. Everyone believed it, until one quiet whisper broke the silence. The billionaire turned and exposed his fiancée's secret. The champagne glass slipped from Lydia's manicured fingers, crystal shattering against the marble floor of the Meridian Hotel's penthouse suite as the words echoed in the sudden silence. She paid the nurse to lie about her pregnancy. 18-year-old Courtney Williams stood frozen beside billionaire tech mogul Ryan Gosling, her dark eyes wide with the weight of what she'd just whispered into his ear. The revelation hung in the air like smoke, poisoning the elegant engagement party that had been in full swing just moments before. Ryan's jaw clenched as he stared at his fiancée, Lydia Ashford, the woman he'd been about to marry in 3 weeks, the woman whose supposed pregnancy had accelerated their entire relationship. Lydia's face had drained of all color, her perfectly applied makeup suddenly looking like a mask about to crack. "What did you just say?" Lydia's voice trembled, but there was steel beneath the vulnerability, the kind of steel that came from years of manipulating situations to her advantage. "Welcome to our family, beautiful soul. If you're new here, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Your presence makes this journey more meaningful." Courtney's hands shook as she reached into her small purse, pulling out a crumpled envelope. "I have the receipts, Mr. Gosling. The real medical records, the payments to Nurse Henderson, everything." The room, filled with New York's elite, business moguls, and society figures, had gone deadly quiet. Someone's phone clattered to the floor. A waiter stopped mid-pour, champagne overflowing onto the white tablecloth. Ryan's blue eyes, usually warm when they looked at Lydia, had turned arctic. "Explain. Now." But it was Courtney who spoke, her young voice carrying a strength that surprised even her. 3 months ago, I was working double shifts at Mount Sinai's night cleaning crew to pay for my mom's chemo treatments. I overheard Miss Ashford in the VIP wing talking to Nurse Henderson about faking pregnancy test results. Lydia laughed, but it was hollow, desperate. "Ryan, you can't seriously be listening to the help. This is obviously some sort of—" "I recorded it." Courtney's words cut through Lydia's protests like a blade. She held up an old smartphone, its cracked screen catching the chandelier light. "I didn't know what to do with it then. I was just a scared kid who needed the job. But when I saw the engagement announcement in the papers, when I realized you were about to trap him with a lie." Ryan's breathing had become shallow, controlled. The kind of breathing he used during hostile takeovers when billions were on the line. But this wasn't about money. This was about the complete destruction of everything he thought he knew about the woman he'd planned to spend his life with. "Play it," he said quietly. Lydia stepped forward, her designer heels clicking against the marble. "Ryan, please. Whatever she thinks she heard, play it." Courtney's fingers trembled as she navigated to the audio file. The room seemed to hold its breath as her thumb hovered over the play button. This moment would change everything for Ryan, for Lydia, and for her own life in ways she couldn't yet imagine. The first words of the recording crackled through the phone's tiny speaker. Lydia's voice, clear and unmistakable. "I need the pregnancy test to show positive. The real one was negative, obviously, but Ryan can never know that." The sound of Ryan's world crashing down was almost audible in the silence that followed. Lydia's mask finally cracked completely. Tears streamed down her face, but they looked calculated rather than genuine. The kind of tears she'd perfected during her years as a socialite navigating New York's ruthless elite circles. "Ryan, please, let me explain." Explain what? His voice rose now, years of buried suspicions and ignored red flags erupting to the surface. 3 months? 3 months of preparing for fatherhood? 3 months of changing my entire life plan because I thought we were building something real? Lydia's composure shattered completely. Tears streamed down her face, but they looked calculated rather than genuine. "Ryan, please, let me explain." "Explain what?" His voice rose now, years of buried suspicions and ignored red flags erupting to the surface. 3 months of preparing for fatherhood. When are gilded that? By FIANCÉE. The guests began shifting uncomfortably. Some reached for their phones, undoubtedly already composing texts to spread this scandal across the city's gossip networks. Others simply stared, transfixed by the destruction of one of New York's most celebrated couples. But Courtney found herself studying Ryan's face, seeing past the fury to the deeper wound underneath. She recognized that particular brand of pain, the kind that came from trusting someone completely and having that trust obliterated. She'd felt it when her father walked out on her and her dying mother. She'd felt it when she'd been passed over for scholarship after scholarship, despite her perfect grades, watching opportunities go to students with better connections. "Mr. Gosling," she said softly, stepping closer despite every instinct telling her to disappear into the background where she belonged. "Don't!" Lydia's voice turned venomous as she whirled on Zara. "Don't you dare speak to him! Do you know what you've done? Do you have any idea whose life you've just destroyed?" "I know exactly whose life I've saved, and it wasn't just his." Ryan turned to look at her again, his blue eyes now holding something she couldn't quite identify. Curiosity? Gratitude? Something deeper. "What do you mean?" Courtney glanced around the room full of New York's elite, their designer clothes and judgmental stares making her acutely aware of her simple black dress, borrowed from her roommate for her catering job tonight. But she'd come this far. There was no backing down now. "The recording," she said, pulling her phone closer to her chest like a shield. "There's more on it, about the prenup she was planning to contest, about the trust fund she was going to claim for the baby, about—" She hesitated, looking at Lydia's pale face. "About what she planned to do after the wedding." Lydia lunged forward, her desperation finally overriding her calculated composure. "Give me that phone, you little—" Ryan caught Lydia's wrist mid-reach, his grip firm but controlled. "Don't touch her." The protective edge in his voice surprised everyone in the room, including Zara, whose breath caught in her throat. When was the last time someone had defended her? When had anyone ever stepped between her and someone trying to hurt her? "Ryan, she's lying," Lydia pleaded, but her voice had lost all conviction. "She's just some cleaning girl trying to get money out of us. Can't you see? This is all a setup." "Some cleaning girl who's working 2 jobs to pay for her mother's cancer treatment," Ryan said quietly, his eyes never leaving Courtney's face. "Some cleaning girl who could have sold this information to the highest bidder, but instead chose to tell me the truth." Courtney felt heat rise in her cheeks. How did he know about her mother? Had he been listening more carefully than she had realized when she'd whispered her confession? "I need to hear the rest," Ryan said, his voice steady now, businesslike, the same tone he'd heard him use during phone calls when she'd cleaned his office late at night. "What else is on the recording?" The tension in the room was palpable. Ryan stared at Lydia, Lydia glared at Zara. Zara was being asked to light a fuse, and she knew there was no turning back. Her hands shook as she looked down at her phone. Once she played the rest, there would be no going back. Lydia's life would be completely destroyed, and her own life would never be the same. She was about to cross a line from invisible cleaning girl to the person who brought down one of New York's most powerful couples. But as she looked up and met Ryan's eyes again, she saw something that gave her courage. Respect. He was looking at her like her voice mattered, like she mattered. "Everything," she whispered. "The whole plan. From the fake pregnancy to the divorce she was already planning." The room held its breath as she pressed play again. Lydia's voice filled the penthouse through Zara's cracked phone speaker, cold and calculating in a way that made everyone in the room recoil. "The prenup becomes void if there's a child. One fake pregnancy, one quick miscarriage after the wedding, and I get half of everything. The Gosling tech empire, the real estate portfolio, everything. Ryan's too soft-hearted. He'll be devastated about losing the baby, and I'll be the grieving almost mother who needs to be taken care of." Nurse Henderson's voice, nervous but complicit. "And after the divorce?" Lydia's laughter sharp as broken glass. "After the divorce, I'd disappear with $50 billion and let him figure out what real heartbreak feels like. Men like Ryan Gosling think they can buy anything. Love, loyalty, happiness. Time to teach him what money can't fix." The recording ended, leaving a silence so profound that the distant sounds of New York traffic 20 floors below seemed deafening. Ryan stood motionless, his face a mask of controlled devastation. 3 years of his life had just been revealed as an elaborate con game. Every kiss, every whispered "I love you," every moment of intimacy had been calculated manipulation designed to rob him of everything he had built. "Ryan," Lydia started, but her voice died as he held up a hand. "Don't." The word came out like a gunshot. "Don't say another word." But Lydia couldn't stop herself. Desperation made her reckless, stripped away the careful facade she had maintained for 3 years. "You don't understand. I do love you, I do. The pregnancy thing was just to speed things up. We were going to get married anyway, and you were planning to divorce me." Ryan's voice was deadly quiet. "Before we were even married, you were planning to take everything and leave. That was before I really knew you, before you realized how much money was actually involved." The accusation hung in the air like poison gas. Lydia's mouth opened and closed soundlessly, unable to form a defense that would damn her further. Courtney, meanwhile, stood frozen, watching the destruction she had unleashed. Part of her felt sick. She had just destroyed a woman's entire life with the press of a button. But another part, the part that had grown up watching her mother work 3 jobs just to afford rent, felt a grim satisfaction seeing someone face consequences for their greed. She started to back toward the service exit, hoping to disappear before anyone remembered she was there. She had done what she came to do. Now she needed to get back to her real life, the world of night shifts and medical bills and borrowed dresses. "Where are you going?" Ryan's voice stopped her cold. She turned to find him looking directly at her, his blue eyes intense and unreadable. I should get back to work. The catering company will be looking for me, and you're not going anywhere." It wasn't a command, but a plea. "Please, I need to understand how long you've known about this. I need to understand everything." Courtney glanced around the room full of staring faces, socialites and business moguls who looked at her like she was a fascinating but dangerous specimen. She didn't belong here. She was 18 years old, wearing a borrowed dress, holding down 2 jobs to pay for her mother's medical bills. These people lived in a different universe. "Mr. Gosling, I really don't think—" "It's Ryan." His voice was softer now, almost vulnerable. "Please, after what you've just done for me, I think we can skip the formalities." Lydia, who had been silent for several long moments, suddenly straightened. The desperate woman was gone, replaced by something harder and more dangerous. The real Lydia, perhaps, the one who had been hiding behind smiles and fake pregnancies for 3 years. "You want to know what's really happening here, Ryan?" Her voice dripped venom. "Little Miss Hero here isn't some noble whistleblower. She's been obsessed with you for months. I've seen her watching you, following you. She cleans your office, right? How convenient that she was just in the right place to record me." Courtney felt the blood drain from her face. "I wasn't—" "Weren't you?" Lydia stepped closer, her desperation transforming into ruthless calculation. How many nights did you stay late, hoping to catch a glimpse of him? How many times did you read about our relationship in the society pages and fantasize about taking my place? Stop! Ryan's voice cut through Lydia's accusations like a blade. But Lydia had found her weapon and wasn't letting go. She's 18 years old, Ryan, a teenager with a schoolgirl crush who saw an opportunity to destroy the woman standing between her and her fantasy. This whole thing is probably some elaborate scheme. I said stop. The authority in Ryan's voice made the entire room fall silent. He stepped between Lydia and Zara, his tall frame creating a protective barrier. Even if that were true, he said quietly, which I don't believe it is, it doesn't change what you did. It doesn't change the fact that you've been lying to me for months, stealing from me, planning to destroy me. He turned to face Lydia fully, and Courtney saw something break in his expression. Not just anger or betrayal, but the death of whatever love he'd thought he felt for this woman. We're done, Lydia. The engagement is off. The wedding is canceled. And if I find out you've taken so much as a pen from my office, I'll have you arrested for fraud. Lydia's composure cracked one final time. You'll regret this, Ryan, both of you. Do you think anyone will believe that little nobody over me? Do you think security will escort you out? Ryan said, his voice completely flat now, professional, the voice of a man who just made the hardest business decision of his life. Don't come back. As Lydia was led away by hotel security, her threats and promises of revenge echoing down the marble hallway, Ryan turned back to Zara. She was still standing there, looking lost and overwhelmed, like someone who'd accidentally wandered into the wrong movie. "Thank you," he said simply. And for the first time since she'd whispered those 6 words into his ear, Courtney allowed herself to meet his eyes and hold them. What do you think happens next between Ryan and Zara? Was Lydia right about Courtney's motives? Or is there something deeper going on? Let me know your thoughts. 20 minutes after Lydia's dramatic exit, the penthouse had cleared of guests faster than smoke in a windstorm. The New York elite had scattered to spread gossip across the city, leaving behind only the wreckage of what was supposed to be an engagement celebration. Scattered champagne glasses, abandoned canapes, and 2 people who barely knew each other but had just shared the most intense moment of their lives. Ryan stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan, his reflection ghost-like against the city lights. He'd loosened his bow tie and rolled up his sleeves, looking more human than Courtney had ever seen him during her months of cleaning his office. "The reporters will be here soon," he said without turning around. TMZ, Page 6, probably CNN Business. This kind of story, billionaire, fake pregnancy, dramatic exposure, it's media gold. Courtney clutched her phone tighter, suddenly understanding the magnitude of what she'd done. "I should go, before they'll find you anyway." Ryan turned to face her, and she was struck by how tired he looked. Not just physically tired, but soul-deep exhausted, like someone who'd been carrying a weight he didn't realize was there. Lydia was right about one thing. They'll want to know everything about the mysterious cleaning girl who brought down New York's golden couple. The words hit Courtney like cold water. She hadn't thought beyond the moment, hadn't considered the consequences of stepping into Ryan Gosling's world. "My mother," she whispered, panic rising in her voice. "If reporters start digging, if they find out about her medical bills, her insurance situation." "Hey." Ryan stepped closer, his voice gentler now. "Look at me." Reluctantly, Courtney met his eyes. Up close, she could see the flecks of gray in the blue, the lines of stress around the corners that spoke of late nights building his empire. "I won't let anything happen to your mother," he said quietly. "That's a promise." "You don't even know me," Courtney protested, but there was something in his tone that made her want to believe him. "Why would you—" "Because you saved my life tonight." His words were simple, direct. "Not just my money or my reputation. You saved me from marrying someone who saw me as nothing more than a bank account with a pulse." Before Courtney could respond, Ryan's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and his expression darkened. It's starting. Gosling engagement ends in scandal is already trending. We need to get you somewhere safe. I can't afford. I'm not asking you to pay for anything. Ryan was already moving toward the penthouse door, grabbing a jacket from the back of a chair. But we need to move fast. Once they identify you, your apartment will be surrounded by cameras within hours. Courtney followed him toward the private elevator, her mind spinning. This is insane. Yesterday, I was invisible. Nobody knew my name, nobody cared where I went or what I did. Now you're talking about hiding me from reporters like I'm some kind of celebrity. The elevator doors closed around them, creating an intimate space that suddenly felt too small. Ryan pressed the button for the parking garage, then turned to study her face. "What's your full name?" "Courtney Williams." The words felt strange on her tongue, weighted with new significance. "Courtney Williams," he repeated, as if testing how it sounded. "How long have you been cleaning my office?" 4 months. She hesitated, then added, "You work late a lot. Sometimes I thought you lived there." A ghost of a smile crossed his lips. "Sometimes I felt like I did. Building a company is consuming, especially when you're trying to prove you're more than just old money and family connections." The elevator reached the garage, and Ryan led her toward a sleek, black Tesla Model S. But instead of getting in, he leaned against the driver's side door and really looked at her for the first time. "Lydia said you were obsessed with me," she said carefully. "Was he right?" Heat flooded Courtney's cheeks. That's not." She took a deep breath, forcing herself to meet his eyes. "I noticed you. When I cleaned your office, sometimes you'd be there working, and you'd look so lonely. Like you were surrounded by all these things, success, money, people, but you were still alone. And that made you want to record conversations in hospital hallways?" "No." Courtney's voice grew stronger. "What made me record that conversation was hearing someone plan to hurt a person who didn't deserve it, even if that person was someone I'd never actually talked to." Ryan studied her face for a long moment. "But you did talk to me. Tonight, you could have sent an anonymous tip, leaked the recording to the press, done a dozen things that wouldn't have put you in the spotlight. Instead, you walked up to me at my own engagement party and whispered the truth in my ear. Why?" Courtney found herself trapped by the intensity of his gaze. Because you deserved to hear it from someone who cared about doing the right thing, not someone who just wanted to cause drama." "Someone who cared," Ryan repeated softly. The moment stretched between them, charged with something neither of them was ready to name. Then Ryan's phone buzzed again, breaking the spell. "Mystery woman destroys billionaire romance," he read from the screen. "They're fast." He unlocked the car and held the passenger door open for her. "My family has a safe house upstate, completely private, no cell towers nearby, no way for anyone to find us. We can stay there until this dies down." "Us?" Courtney's voice came out smaller than she intended. "I can't exactly leave you to face this alone," Ryan said. "Not after what you've done for me." Courtney hesitated at the car door. Once she got in, there would be no going back to her invisible life of night shifts and borrowed dresses. She would be stepping fully into Ryan Gosling's world, with all the complications that entailed. "What about your company, your responsibilities?" "They can wait." Ryan's voice was firm. "Some things are more important than business." As Courtney slipped into the leather passenger seat, she couldn't help but wonder if she was making the biggest mistake of her 18-year-old life, or if this was the moment everything would finally change for the better. The tension is building. What do you think will happen when they're alone together at the safe house? Are you Team Ryan and Zara? Or do you think this is moving too fast? Share your thoughts. The safe house was nothing like Courtney had expected. Instead of some sterile corporate retreat, it was a cozy lakeside cabin nestled in the Adirondack Mountains, with worn wooden floors and a stone fireplace that looked like it had warmed generations of families. Ryan had driven them 3 hours north in comfortable silence, both lost in their own thoughts about the seismic shift their lives had just taken. "My grandmother's place," Ryan explained as he carried their minimal luggage inside. "She left it to me when I was 16. Said every man needed somewhere to remember who he was before the world told him who he should be." Courtney ran her fingers along the smooth wooden mantelpiece, studying the collection of framed photographs, a young Ryan with an elderly woman by the lake, family barbecues, Christmas mornings that looked genuinely happy rather than staged for social media. "She looks kind," Courtney said, picking up a photo of Ryan, maybe 10 years old, grinning gap-toothed next to a silver-haired woman holding a fish nearly as big as he was. "Grandma Rose was the only person who never wanted anything from me except to see me smile." Ryan's voice carried a wistfulness that made Courtney turn to look at him. "She died the year I started Gosling Tech. I used to come here when the pressure got too intense, when I needed to remember what actually mattered." "Is that why you brought me here?" The question slipped out before Courtney could stop herself. "Because you needed to remember what mattered?" Ryan paused in the act of lighting the fireplace, his back still turned to her. "I brought you here because you risked everything to tell me the truth, and now you're in danger because of it. But also," he straightened, finally meeting her eyes, "because I haven't felt this clear about anything in years." The fire caught, sending warm light dancing across the cabin walls. Courtney settled onto the worn leather couch, suddenly overwhelmed by everything that had happened. 12 hours ago, she was just another invisible worker in Ryan's world. Now she was sitting in his late grandmother's cabin, running from reporters, having saved him from the biggest mistake of his life. "I still can't believe I actually did it," she said quietly. "When I recorded that conversation 3 months ago, I never thought... what was I supposed to do with information like that?" "You kept it for 3 months?" Ryan settled beside her on the couch, careful to maintain respectful distance, but close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive but not overwhelming, cedar and citrus. "You pulled your knees up to your chest, a defensive gesture she'd learned in childhood?" "Tell me about your mother," Ryan said gently. The change of subject caught Courtney off guard. "What?" "Earlier you mentioned her medical bills, her treatment. Tell me about her." Courtney was quiet for so long that Ryan thought she wouldn't answer. Then, softly, stage 3 breast cancer. Diagnosed 8 months ago. She's only 38, had me when she was 20, right out of high school." Her voice grew smaller. "My dad left when she got sick, said he couldn't handle it." Ryan felt something clench in his chest. "That's why you're working 2 jobs. Her insurance only covers 60%. The rest," Courtney shrugged, but Ryan could see the weight of responsibility in the gesture. "I dropped out of high school to work full-time. Was supposed to graduate last month, but keeping Mom alive seemed more important than walking across a stage." "You dropped out of high school to pay for your mother's cancer treatment." Ryan's voice was soft with something that might be awe. "Anyone would do the same thing." "No," Ryan said firmly. "They wouldn't. Most people would find excuses, other options, ways to avoid sacrificing their own future." Courtney looked at him sharply, spoken like someone who's never had to choose between his dreams and his family's survival. The words stung because they were true. "You're right," Ryan admitted. "I've never had to make choices like that, but I understand sacrifice." "Do you?" Ryan was quiet for a moment, staring into the fire. When he spoke, his voice carried years of buried pain. "My father built Gosling Industries from nothing, worked 18-hour days, missed every school play, every birthday, every moment that mattered. When I was 12, he had a heart attack at his desk. Died alone in his office at 2 in the morning, surrounded by the contracts and deals that were more important to him than his family." Courtney felt her defensive posture soften. "I'm sorry." "My mother remarried within a year, a senator who saw the Gosling name as a useful addition to his political portfolio. Suddenly, I wasn't just Ryan anymore. I was the heir to a fortune, a networking opportunity, a way for my stepfather to cement his social standing. Every relationship I've had since then, I've wondered if they saw me or just saw the money, including Lydia.
Especially Lydia. Ryan's laugh was bitter. 3 years of wondering if I was paranoid for questioning her motives. 3 years of telling myself I was being unfair, that love was supposed to require trust. And the whole time, she was planning to take everything. They sat in silence for a while, the fire crackling between them in the weight of their shared revelations. Finally, Courtney spoke. That night I recorded her. I almost quit the next day. Told myself it wasn't my business, that I should just focus on my own problems. But then I kept thinking about how my dad looked at my mom right before he left, like she was already dead to him, like her sickness made her worthless. Her voice grew stronger. I couldn't let someone do that to you, even if you were just some rich guy I'd never actually talked to. Ryan turned to face her fully. You saved me from becoming my father, a man who valued the wrong things and died alone because of it. And you're helping me protect my mother from the media circus I accidentally created. Accidentally? Courtney met his eyes. Well, maybe not entirely accidentally. Maybe I did stay late some nights hoping I'd see you. Maybe I did read every article about your engagement and wonder what it would be like to be someone who mattered to someone like you. She paused. But I never planned this. I never planned any of this. Ryan reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently touched her hand. Neither did I, but I'm glad it happened. The admission hung between them like a bridge neither was quite ready to cross. What happens now? Courtney whispered. Now, said Ryan, his thumb brushing across her knuckles, we figure out how to move forward, together. Courtney woke to the smell of coffee and something that might have been pancakes. For a moment, she forgot where she was. The unfamiliar weight of Egyptian cotton sheets, the sound of water lapping against a distant shore, and the absence of city sirens that usually served as her alarm clock. Then it all came rushing back. The engagement party, the recording, the 3-hour drive through darkness to a world that felt like it existed outside of time. She padded barefoot into the main room, wearing the oversized Columbia University t-shirt Ryan had found for her the night before. He was standing at the stove, his back to her, wearing jeans and a simple gray sweater that made him look younger, more approachable than the intimidating billionaire she'd watched from afar. You cook? She asked, settling onto one of the bar stools at the Kitwalter Island. Grandma Rose's rule, Ryan said without turning around. Anyone who stayed in her house had to learn to make her buttermilk pancakes, said it was the difference between being a guest and being family. He turned to face her, and Courtney was struck by how different he looked in the morning light streaming through the cabin windows, less polished, more real. His hair was slightly mussed, and there was an ease in his movements that she'd never seen during those late nights in his office. You look better, she said, then immediately felt heat rise in her cheeks. I mean, more relaxed. Not that you looked bad before, just... I know what you meant. Ryan's smile was warm, genuine. I feel better. First time in months I've slept more than 4 hours straight. He slid a plate of golden pancakes in front of her, and Courtney realized she couldn't remember the last time someone had cooked for her. Since her mother's diagnosis, she'd been the one doing all the caregiving, all the nurturing. These are incredible, she said after the first bite. Your grandmother must have been an amazing woman. She was. Taught me that money was just a tool, not a measure of worth. That the most important conversations happen over shared meals, not in boardrooms. Ryan poured himself coffee and leaned against the counter across from her. She would have liked you. You think? I know. She had a thing about people who stood up for what was right, even when it cost them something. Courtney set down her fork, suddenly serious. What is this going to cost me, Ryan? Really? When we go back to the city, when the media attention dies down, what happens to the girl who destroyed Lydia Ashford? Ryan was quiet for a moment, considering the question with the same intensity he probably brought to million-dollar business decisions. Lydia has connections, influence. She'll try to make your life difficult, but she also just lost any credibility she had, and she has bigger problems than revenge. Fraud charges, breach of contract lawsuits. Her lawyers will be advising her to disappear, not escalate. And your world, your friends, your business associates, what will they think about you being whatever this is, with an 18-year-old high school dropout? The question hung between them, acknowledging the elephant that had been following them since the moment she'd whispered those words in his ear. Ryan set down his coffee cup and moved around the island until he was standing directly in front of her stool. "Zara, look at me." Reluctantly, she met his eyes. "You spent 3 years with someone who had every advantage, the right family, the right education, the right connections, someone who looked perfect on paper and at charity galas and in society magazines, and she was planning to destroy me." His voice was steady, certain. "You're 18 years old, and you risked everything to save a stranger from making the biggest mistake of his life. You sacrificed your own education to take care of your dying mother. You worked 2 jobs and still found the courage to stand up to one of the most powerful women in New York." He reached out and gently touched a strand of her hair behind her ear. "Anyone who has a problem with that can go to hell." Courtney felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. "I'm scared." "Of what?" "Of this. Of you. Of feeling like maybe I matter to someone and then finding out it was all just gratitude or guilt or some kind of savior complex." Ryan's expression softened. "Can I tell you something? Yesterday morning, I woke up dreading my own engagement party. I'd been dreading it for weeks, telling myself it was just pre-wedding nerves. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. I just didn't trust myself enough to believe it." He pulled up the stool next to hers, closing the distance between them. "When you whispered those words to me, it wasn't just about exposing Lydia's lies. It was about someone finally seeing what I couldn't let myself see. Someone caring enough about my well-being to risk everything to tell me the truth." He paused. "That's not gratitude, Zara. That's recognition." "Recognition of what?" "Of something real." The words settled between them like a promise. Courtney found herself leaning closer, drawn by the warmth in his eyes and the way he said her name, like it meant something, like she meant something. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted. I've dated, but nothing serious, nothing that mattered, and definitely nothing with someone who has his own Wikipedia page." Ryan laughed, a sound that was becoming dangerously familiar. "I don't know how to do this either. My last relationship was built on lies, and before that," he shrugged, "let's just say my track record isn't great when it comes to figuring out people's real motives. So what do? We start here, today, in this place where neither of us has to be anyone other than who we really are." Ryan reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers. "We figure it out together." Courtney looked down at their joined hands, his manicured and soft from a life of luxury, hers calloused from cleaning supplies and late-night shifts. They shouldn't fit, but somehow they did. "Together," she repeated, the word feeling like a leap of faith. Outside, the lake reflected the morning sun like scattered diamonds, and for the first time in months, Courtney allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be okay. The connection is deepening. Are you feeling the chemistry between them, or do you think they need more time to build trust? What would your advice be to Courtney right now? The call came at 3:47 p.m., shattering the peaceful bubble they'd created over the past 2 days at the lake house. Ryan had been teaching Courtney to skip stones while she told him about her dreams of becoming a nurse, dreams she'd put on hold when her mother got sick. They'd been laughing at his failed attempts to master her grandmother's cornbread recipe when his phone buzzed with an unknown number. He almost didn't answer it. "Ryan Gosling speaking." "Mr. Gosling,
This is Detective Martinez with the NYPD. We need to speak with you about Lydia Ashford and some irregularities we've discovered in your case." "What kind of irregularities?" "It concerns the young woman who provided the recording evidence, Miss Williams. We've been investigating Miss Ashford's claims about the authenticity of the evidence, and there are some discrepancies we need to discuss." "What are you talking about?" "Sir, I'd prefer to discuss this in person. Can you return to the city? And we'll need to speak with Miss Williams as well." Ryan's hand tightened on the phone. "She's done nothing wrong." "That may be true, sir, but there are questions that need answers. Miss Ashford has provided some concerning information about Miss Williams' background and her potential motives." After Ryan hung up, the silence stretched between them like a chasm. Courtney stood at the water's edge, her borrowed sweater wrapped tightly around her small frame, somehow sensing that their perfect bubble was about to burst. "We have to go back," Ryan said finally. "What happened?" "Lydia's fighting back. She's claiming the recording is fake or that you doctored it somehow. The police want to question both of us." Courtney felt the world tilt beneath her feet. "But it's real. You heard it yourself." "I know it's real, but apparently Lydia has some story about your background, your motives." Ryan ran his hands through his hair, the stress lines returning to his face. "She's trying to destroy your credibility." The drive back to the city was nothing like their peaceful journey up. This time the silence was heavy with unspoken fears and the growing realization that the real world was about to intrude on whatever they'd been building. At the police station, they were separated immediately. "Standard procedure," Detective Martinez explained as Courtney led to a different room. The last thing she saw was Ryan's face, tight with worry and something that might have been doubt. The interrogation room was exactly like the ones in movies. Fluorescent lights, metal table, uncomfortable chairs designed to make people want to confess to crimes they hadn't committed. Detective Martinez was joined by a woman who introduced herself as Detective Walter from the Fraud Division. "Miss Williams, we're going to record this conversation," Detective Walter said, setting a small device on the table between them. "You're not under arrest, but you have the right to have an attorney present." "I can't afford an attorney, and I don't need one. I haven't done anything wrong." "Let's talk about your relationship with Ryan Gosling." The question hit her like a physical blow. "We don't have a relationship. I mean, we barely knew each other until 3 days ago." "But you were aware of him before that. You cleaned his office." "Yes. And according to Miss Ashford, you made multiple attempts to interact with him, staying late when you knew he'd be working, leaving personal items in his office, even following him to restaurants and social events." Courtney's stomach dropped. "That's not true." Detective Martinez leaned forward. "Miss Ashford has security footage, Miss Williams. Footage of you in places you had no business being. Footage of you watching Mr. Gosling at public events where you weren't working." The room seemed to spin. Courtney thought about the one time she'd convinced her roommate to go to a charity gala where she knew Ryan would be, not to approach him, just to see him in his element, to understand the world he lived in. She had stood in the back, wearing a dress from Goodwill, watching him give a speech about education funding. "I went to one event. One. I was curious about what? About how you could insert yourself into his life? No! I was trying to understand why someone who seemed so decent in person could be engaged to someone like Lydia. I knew she was wrong for him, but I didn't know how wrong until I heard that conversation." Speaking of that conversation, it's interesting that you just happened to be cleaning near the VIP wing when this alleged conversation took place. Miss Ashford says you weren't scheduled to work that area. Courtney felt the walls closing in. "I was covering for another girl who called in sick. I can give you her name." "We've already spoken to the cleaning service. There's no record of you being assigned to that wing that night." The truth hit Courtney like a sledgehammer. She had switched assignments that night, but not because someone called in sick. She'd traded with another girl because she'd heard Lydia would be there for some kind of medical appointment. She'd been curious, maybe even suspicious, but she hadn't planned to record anything. "I traded shifts," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I thought maybe I could figure out what was wrong with their relationship." The detectives exchanged glances, and Courtney realized how her words sounded. Like she'd been stalking Ryan. Like she'd been planning this all along. "Miss Williams," Detective Martinez said gently, "Miss Ashford claims you've been obsessed with Mr. Gosling for months, that you deliberately sought out information to use against her. She says the recording is either fabricated or taken out of context." "It's not fabricated. She admitted to everything. The fake pregnancy, the divorce plan, all of it." "But you did deliberately put yourself in position to gather that information." Courtney opened her mouth to deny it, then closed it again. Because, in a way, it was true. She had deliberately traded shifts. She had been curious about Lydia's medical appointments. She had been attracted to Ryan and concerned about his relationship. She just hadn't planned to destroy anyone's life with what she discovered. In another room, Ryan was facing his own interrogation, and with each question, each piece of evidence Lydia had provided, doubt began to creep in like poison. Had Courtney really saved him, or had he been manipulated by someone even more cunning than Lydia? When they were finally released 3 hours later, the damage was done. They rode back to Ryan's penthouse in silence, both lost in their own spiral of doubt and fear. "Do you think I'm crazy?" Courtney asked as the elevator rose to his floor. Ryan looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time since he'd met her, he wasn't sure what he saw. "I don't know," he said quietly. "I don't know what to think anymore." The words shattered something between them that had been fragile to begin with. "Everything is falling apart. Do you think Lydia has successfully planted enough doubt to destroy Ryan and Courtney's connection? What would you believe if you were in Ryan's position right now?" Courtney stood alone in Ryan's penthouse, staring out at the Manhattan skyline that had always felt like a different planet from her cramped studio apartment in Queens. The city lights blurred through her tears as she replayed the detective's words. Ryan's doubt. The way he'd looked at her in that elevator, like she was a stranger who'd infiltrated his life with carefully calculated lies. Ryan had disappeared into his home office after they'd returned, claiming he needed to think things through. That was 2 hours ago. 2 hours of Courtney sitting in his living room, surrounded by luxury she'd never dreamed of touching, wondering if she'd imagined the connection they'd shared at the lake house. Her phone buzzed. A text from her roommate. "Girl, where are you? Your mom's been asking for you. Hospital called this morning about her next round of chemo." Reality crashed over her like cold water. While she'd been playing house with a billionaire, her mother was fighting for her life. The world she actually belonged to, the world of medical bills and night shifts and borrowed hope, was still there, waiting for her to remember her place. She was reaching for her purse when Ryan's office door opened. He emerged looking haggard, his hair disheveled from running his hands through it, his expensive shirt wrinkled. In his hand was a thick manila folder. "I had my security team investigate. Lydia, you, everything," he said without preamble. Courtney's heart stopped. "And?" Ryan moved to the bar cart, pouring himself 3 fingers of whiskey before turning to face her. "Lydia Ashford isn't who she claimed to be. Her real name is Lydia Hensley. She's been married twice before, both to wealthy older men. Both marriages ended in messy divorces that left her with significant settlements." He took a sip of whiskey, his eyes never leaving Courtney's face. "She's also currently under investigation in California for insurance fraud related to a fake pregnancy claim 3 years ago." Courtney felt her knees weaken. So the recording is completely legitimate. More than that, it fits a pattern of behavior she's exhibited for years. Ryan set down his glass. She's a professional con artist, and I was her biggest mark yet. Relief flooded through Zara, followed immediately by confusion. Then why do you still look like you don't trust me? Ryan was quiet for a long moment, staring into his whiskey. Because they also investigated you. The words hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Courtney felt every muscle in her body tense. And? Courtney Williams, 18 years old, graduated valedictorian from Queens Public High School, full scholarship to Columbia University, which you deferred when your mother was diagnosed with cancer 8 months ago. Courtney's breath caught. How did you? You lied to me. Ryan's voice was quiet, but she could hear the hurt underneath. You told me you dropped out. You told me you were just some high school dropout working 2 jobs. I didn't lie. You're brilliant, Zara. Valedictorian brilliant, full scholarship to Columbia University brilliant, and you want me to believe that someone with your intelligence just happened to stumble into exposing Lydia's plan? The accusation hit like a physical blow. Courtney sank onto the couch, her legs no longer able to support her. You think I planned this? She whispered. You think I manipulated everything? Ryan began pacing, the folder clutched in his hands like evidence in a trial. I think you're smart enough to have figured out exactly what Lydia was doing. I think you positioned yourself to gather evidence. I think you calculated exactly how and when to reveal it for maximum impact. And then what? Courtney's voice rose, anger cutting through her hurt. Then I magically made you develop feelings for me? Then I forced you to bring me to your grandmother's house and cook me breakfast and tell me about your father? I don't know. Ryan's composure finally cracked. I don't know what's real anymore. 3 days ago, I thought I was marrying someone who loved me, and she was planning to destroy me. Now I'm falling for someone who might have orchestrated this entire thing. Falling for me? The words slipped out before Courtney could stop them. Ryan stopped pacing, his eyes meeting hers across the room. Yes, he said quietly, which terrifies me because I can't tell if what I'm feeling is real or if you're just that good at this. Courtney stood up slowly, her heart breaking with each word. You want to know the truth, Ryan? The whole truth? He nodded, bracing himself. I was valedictorian. I did get a full scholarship to Columbia, and yes, I'm smart enough to have figured out Lydia's game before I ever recorded that conversation. Courtney's voice grew stronger with each admission. I traded shifts that night because I was suspicious of her. I'd seen her with other men, seen her lie about small things, watched how she treated service staff when she thought no one was looking. Ryan's expression darkened, but she pressed on. I followed you to that charity gala because I was trying to understand why someone who seemed genuinely kind in person could be with someone so cruel. I stayed late cleaning your office because I was attracted to you, and those were the only moments I could pretend we existed in the same world. Tears were streaming down her face now, but she didn't stop. And yes, when I heard Lydia planning to destroy you, I recorded it because I'm smart enough to know that my word against hers would mean nothing. I'm an 18-year-old black girl from Queens, and she's Manhattan royalty. Who do you think people would believe? Ryan had gone very still, his whiskey forgotten. But here's what I didn't plan, what I couldn't calculate or manipulate or control, Courtney continued, her voice breaking. I didn't plan to fall in love with you. The words hung in the air between them like a bridge neither was sure they could cross. I didn't plan to care more about protecting your heart than advancing my own life. I didn't plan to give up my future at Columbia to work 2 jobs for my mother, and I sure as hell didn't plan to risk everything, my job, my safety, my mother's treatment, to save someone who would end up thinking I was just another person trying to use him. She moved toward the door, her decision made. But that's what happened. So now you have a choice, Ryan. You can believe that an 18-year-old girl orchestrated an elaborate con to, what, get a few days in a lake house, destroy her own anonymity, risk her mother's medical care? She paused at the door. Or you can believe that sometimes, when everything feels impossible, the universe sends someone who gives a damn about doing the right thing. The door closed behind her with a soft click, leaving Ryan alone with his whiskey and the choice that would define the rest of his life. The moment of truth. Will Ryan choose fear or love? What would you do in his position? And was Courtney right to walk away? Let me know your thoughts. Ryan stood frozen in his empty penthouse for exactly 3 minutes and 47 seconds after Courtney left. He knew the precise timing because he spent those minutes staring at his Patek Philippe watch, listening to his own heartbeat, feeling the weight of the choice he'd just forced her to make. Then he was moving. He grabbed his keys, his wallet, his jacket, and ran for the elevator. But as the floors ticked down, a terrible thought struck him. He had no idea where she lived. In all their conversations, all their moments of connection, he'd never asked for her address. She was rushing back to her world, and he had no roadmap to follow her there. The lobby doorman looked up in surprise as Ryan burst through the revolving doors at a near sprint. "Mr. Gosling, sir, is everything? I need you to call me a cab to Mount Sinai Hospital, now." If Courtney was going anywhere, it would be to her mother. Courtney sat in the oncology waiting room, her borrowed designer clothes looking absurdly out of place among the tired families and worn chairs. She'd been there for an hour, waiting for visiting hours to begin, trying to figure out how to explain to her mother that she'd fallen in love with a billionaire and then lost him in the span of 3 days. "Courtney Williams?" She looked up to see a familiar face, Dr. Patricia Hayes, her mother's oncologist. But Dr. Hayes looked confused, almost concerned. "Yes, that's me. Could we speak privately for a moment?" Courtney followed the doctor into a small consultation room, her heart racing. "Is my mother okay? Did something happen with her treatment?" "Your mother is fine. Better than fine, actually. But I need to ask you something." Dr. Hayes consulted her tablet. "Did you recently come into some money, win the lottery, receive an inheritance?" "No. Why?" "Because someone paid your mother's entire medical bill, all of it, past, present, and future treatments through the end of her care plan. The payment came through this morning." Courtney felt the world tilt. "That's impossible. The bills are over $300,000. $347,000 to be exact, all paid in full by something called the Rose Foundation." The Rose Foundation. Ryan's grandmother's name. "There's more," Dr. Hayes continued. "The same foundation also established a scholarship in your name at Columbia University. Full tuition, room and board, plus a living stipend for your mother's ongoing care." Courtney sank into the plastic chair, her mind reeling. He'd done this before she walked out, before she told him she loved him. While he was sitting in his office questioning her motives, he'd been quietly ensuring her future. "Dr. Hayes, I need to see my mother, now." "Baby girl!" Patricia Williams looked better than she had in months, her dark skin glowing despite the chemo, her eyes bright with hope. "What's this I hear about some mystery benefactor? And why are you dressed like you robbed Nordstrom?" Courtney collapsed into the chair beside her mother's bed, the entire story pouring out in a rush. The recording, Ryan, Lydia, the lake house, the police interrogation, their fight, his doubt, her confession of love. "So let me get this straight," Patricia Williams said when Courtney finished. "This man paid for your entire treatment and your college education while he was mad at you?" "I think so." "Baby, that's not the action of a man who doesn't trust you. That's the action of a man who's terrified of trusting you because he loves you too much to survive being wrong." Before Courtney could respond, there was a soft knock on the door. "Mrs. Williams, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a gentleman here who says he needs to speak with Courtney. He's been in the waiting room for 2 hours. Patricia's eyes lit up with mischief. Well, send him in. I want to meet the man who paid for my cancer treatment. Ryan appeared in the doorway, still wearing his expensive shirt and designer jeans, looking completely out of place in the sterile hospital room. His hair was disheveled, his eyes slightly wild, like he'd been running. "Mrs. Williams," he said, his voice carefully respectful. "I'm Ryan. I'm sorry to intrude, but I needed to—" "Sit down, son," Patricia interrupted, patting the chair on the other side of her bed. "We need to talk." Ryan glanced at Courtney, who was staring at him with a mixture of disbelief and something that might have been hope. "You paid for her treatment," Courtney said quietly, "before I left, before you knew if you could trust me." "I knew I could trust you," Ryan said, settling carefully into the chair Patricia had indicated. "I was just too scared to admit it to myself." "Scared of what?" Ryan looked at Patricia, then back at Courtney. "Scared that if I let myself believe in you completely, and you turned out to be like everyone else, it would destroy me." Patricia made a soft sound that might have been understanding. "You know what destroys people, Ryan? Not believing in love when it shows up at your door." "Mom, hush, baby girl. I'm talking to your man here." Patricia fixed Ryan with a look that probably terrified Courtney as a teenager. "My daughter is the best person I know. She gave up her dreams to take care of me without a moment's hesitation. She works herself to exhaustion, never complains, never asks for anything for herself." Ryan nodded, his eyes never leaving Patricia's face. "So when someone like that risks everything to save you from making a terrible mistake, you don't question her motives. You thank God someone that good exists in the world, and you hold on to her with both hands." I know that now." He turned to Courtney, his expression vulnerable in a way she'd never seen before. "I was in that office running background checks on you because I was looking for reasons not to trust you, because trusting you meant admitting that I'm completely, terrifyingly in love with you." Courtney felt her breath catch. "But even while I was doubting you, I was setting up the foundation, because regardless of what happened between us, you deserve to have your dreams back. Your mother deserved the best care money could buy, and I needed to know that even if I lost you, I'd done something to show you how much you meant to me." Patricia was grinning now, clearly enjoying the drama unfolding in her hospital room. "Courtney," Ryan continued, "I can't promise I won't have moments of doubt. 3 years with Lydia taught me to question everything. But I can promise that I'll choose to trust you every day, even when my fear tells me not to." Courtney stood up slowly, moving around her mother's bed until she was standing directly in front of Ryan. "And I can promise that I'll never give you a reason to regret that choice." When Ryan kissed her, soft and careful and full of promise, Patricia Williams applauded from her hospital bed. "Now that's what I call a happy ending," she said, wiping tears from her eyes. 6 months later, Ryan stood in the same penthouse where his world had first been shattered and then rebuilt. But this time, instead of an engagement party for a relationship built on lies, he was hosting a celebration for something real. Courtney emerged from the bedroom wearing a simple blue dress, not borrowed this time, but chosen specifically because Ryan had mentioned it matched her eyes. She'd started at Columbia in the fall, splitting her time between pre-med courses and working part-time at Gosling Tech's new community outreach program. "Ready?" she asked, smoothing his lapels, in a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. "Ready," he confirmed, then paused. "Courtney?" "Yeah?" "Thank you for saving me from a life I didn't even know I didn't want." She stood on her tiptoes and kissed him softly. "Thank you for saving me right back." As they walked into the main room to celebrate Patricia Williams' 6-month cancer-free milestone with their closest friends and family, Ryan reflected on how sometimes the universe did send exactly the right person at exactly the right moment. Sometimes love really did win out. The end. What a journey! From a whispered confession to true love conquering all obstacles. Did this ending satisfy your heart? What was your favorite moment in their love story? Share your thoughts below, and thank you for taking this emotional ride with Ryan and Courtney.